Today, let's talk about surviving parental invasion. Now, what can happen during the years of the invasion is there can be trauma bonding, unfortunately, with the parent. So just as it implies, in the trauma, we feel bonded. That makes it harder to separate, pull away, because we share this horrible thing in common. So then what can happen is abusive love, if you want to call it love, this abusive love seems normal. It becomes normalized, and then as we grow up, we carry that into our adulthood. So of course we're going to probably be looking for a mate who has these specifications, qualifications we're looking for. You have to abuse me a little bit to get my love. You have to treat me like a doormat a bit if you want attention from me, because that's how I got love from my parents. I was treated like a doormat. So now you're looking to replace what's familiar. You're wanting to continue it, because how would you know anything different otherwise? Also, if it's long-term invasion, it can impact our brain structure, the way our neurons connect or don't connect, the ways our brain transmits information. So for example, something like being malnourished, put in a closet for a day or two, being neglected all the time like you really don't even live there, that can impact our cognitive or psychiatric health. So what do I mean when I say parental invasion? Well, if you're a kid who grew up in a dysfunctional family, a lot of chaos going on, maybe you're a victim of one of many kinds of abuse that are out there. Maybe your parents divorced and you were flip-flopped back and forth between two households. Maybe one of your parents was an alcoholic or an addict. Maybe you witnessed domestic violence, or maybe they came at you personally. You were a scapegoat. You were handpicked to be a victim of some kind of abuse by one of your own parents. Or parental invasion can mean you were ignored, you were abandoned. They didn't really give a shit about you. That's parental invasion. It's an invasion because you have to deal with the ramifications of all these things I just mentioned. You have to deal with the onslaught or lack of onslaught. Because being ignored or abandoned can be just as painful as a child who is physically beaten once a week. So there's no levels to how we compare childhood trauma. It's simply that you had to go through it. We'll call that a parental invasion. You weren't helped growing up. You weren't supported. You weren't given the tools you need, so you had to scramble for your own, including coping mechanisms, defense mechanisms, and so on. And if you look up the word to invade or invasion, it's defined as an unwelcome intrusion into one's domain. When parents are trying to get a desired response from one of their children, then they may very well use violence, threats, some sort of manipulation, and of course, intimidation. Intimidation can involve gaslighting. The child grows up feeling like they're an object or a thing, a robot, because in a way they're being treated that way, right? They're being invaded. And after the invasion happens, depending on how it happens, when it happens, etc., there can be kindness and apologies, and I'm so sorry, all the way to emotional distance and impassivity, emotional coldness. What was it like for you? What's your resilience like? Can you define, do you notice your resilience? If you were invaded physically or sexually, mentally, verbally, emotionally, growing up, where is your resilience? Do you have it? This is an important question to ask ourselves because many people get through trauma. We survive it. Physically, we survive it, and then we can go on to have meaningful lives with lots of opportunities for joy when we tap into our resilience. So one way to see where you're at with all this is, how do you handle stress? Another way to see where you're at is ask yourself if you try to hurt people in any way. Because hurt people hurt people. So sometimes we need to analyze and see and look at and shine a spotlight on how hurt we are. In exploring this is how we develop our resiliency, because we're looking at the truth. We're not trying to push it away. We're naming and calling out what we've been through, and then we have more clarity and we can start working with it in ways that we begin to advocate for ourselves. Resilience can be defined as being kicked down, knocked down in life, but coming back with an equal strength or even stronger because of it. You were invaded, so you weren't taught any of this. You have to learn these skills now as an adult. So one way to start doing this is to ask yourself, do I take all setbacks personally, like I've done something wrong, I'm a failure, there's something wrong with me? Failure can be a good thing because we have a lot to learn from failure. Being okay with making mistakes and sometimes failing can help us with emotional regulation. And that's the opposite of what you learned during childhood. Nobody helped you with emotional regulation because they were too busy verbally abusing you or emotionally smothering you, or beating you up every other Friday when they were drunk. So that's not going to help with emotional regulation at all. So now you're learning how to emotionally regulate, which means you'll begin cutting yourself more slack, which is a form of resilience. Part of resiliency means you're able to see the gray area. Sometimes we win some, sometimes we lose some. That's part of life. But if you weren't helped growing up with these ideas because you were busy being invaded through most of your childhood, then it may be difficult to see the gray area. Things need to be more black and white, so you think in your mind, because that may have been a childhood coping mechanism. Things have to be either or. Giving yourself permission to learn by making mistakes is healthy. So a quick little video about incorporating resilience in your life after you've had a childhood where you're a victim of parental invasion. Please leave me some comments below. If you're a victim of any kind of invasion, I'd love to hear your story in the comment section. Please subscribe to my mental health YouTube channel if you like these kind of videos. And until next week, this is Brad Shore signing off from Ask a Shrink.